Chapter 20. Salvage or Scourge. The collective grief did not fade, but it settled, like dust in the still air of the HAB module. It became a new layer of reality, as tangible as the cold deck plating underfoot. People spoke in hushed tones, not of the future, but of the past. Memories of Earth, of Mars, of the Belt became a kind of currency, painful but precious. An engineer would trade an extra algae cake for a detailed description of a pine forest. A medic would treat a minor burn in exchange for a story about ocean waves. It was a coping mechanism, Rook knew, a way to keep the vast, horrifying truth at bay by focusing on its shattered fragments. But it was also, in its way, an act of defiance. They were remembering, and in this new dark age, remembrance was a radical act. The practical problems, however, did not respect grief. The numbers Hayes recited at the daily briefing were a cold, relentless drumbeat. Water reclaimer efficiency has dropped another 3%, the filter matrix is degrading, and we lack the nanomaterials to fabricate a new one. Hydroponics Bay 2 is showing signs of fungal blight. We're treating it with the last of our broad-spectrum fungicide. Caloric intake per person is now 15% below sustainable long-term minimums. The first cases of nutritional deficiency are appearing: night blindness, skin lesions. He didn't need to say what everyone was thinking. Soren Carr's arithmetic of souls was no longer a proposal. It was a description of their accelerating reality. The difference was, no one advocated for it anymore. After the psychic shock of the truth, actively choosing death felt like a blasphemy against the memory of the billions who had no choice. But passive acceptance of dwindling rations was just a slower form of the same calculus. Vance presided over these briefings from her seat at the scarred table, her face a mask of focused endurance. The hopeful commander was gone, replaced by a weary judge, sentencing her people to another day of hunger and cold. Prioritize the filter matrix, she'd say. Salvage team, I want every gram of compatible material from the wrecked module. Risha, isolate the infected sections of hydroponics too. Burn them if you have to. We protect what's clean. The salvage runs became more desperate, more dangerous. Rook led them, his perception their only guide through the lethal maze of the outpost's dead zones. He could feel the fatigue in the rock around them, the slow-motion groan of metal succumbing to entropy and deep cold. He found a cache of obsolete but intact superconducting wire. He located a sealed compartment with a dozen old but functional environment suit batteries. Each find was met not with cheers, but with grim nods. It was a stay of execution, not a pardon. One day, while mapping a fissure that had opened in the outer hull of the ruined comms module, his perception brushed against something wrong. It wasn't a structural flaw. It was an echo. A faint, cold resonance that tasted familiar. It was the same frequency as the black data crypt, but wilder, less contained. It emanated from a pile of debris that had been listed as junk metal, irrecoverable. He marked the location. That evening, in the dim command nook, he showed Vance and Hayes the scan. There's something in that pile, not salvage, something active, resonant. Hayes frowned. More Aegis tech? Another crypt? Different, Rook said. The crypt felt like a sealed tomb. This feels like a leak. Vance's eyes narrowed. Romulus? No, the signature is all wrong. Romulus was a hungry silence. This is a cold hum, like a machine left running in an empty room for a century. He met her gaze. We need to investigate. It could be a resource. It could be a threat. But it's a variable, and we have too few of those. Carr, who had begun attending briefings as a de facto representative of the practical caucus, shook his head. A variable is a risk. We're expending calories on salvage with known quantifiable returns. Sending a team after a feeling is a luxury. People are weak. A prolonged EVA in that sector could lead to suit failure, injury, more mouths to feed in medical. It could also be a power source, Rook countered, or intact computing hardware, something that could run the environmental models to find more efficient configurations, or manage the hydroponic cycles to boost yield. He was making it up as he went, but the argument was sound. Ignoring a potential resource because it's unknown is the kind of thinking that leaves us to slowly starve in the dark. The kind of thinking that keeps us alive another week. Carr shot back. We don't have the margin for exploration, Rook. We have the margin for maintenance, barely. Vance listened to the exchange, her eyes moving between them. Rook saw the calculation. Carr was right, in the short, brutal term. But Rook was also right. Their current path led only downward. They needed a breakthrough, not just careful management of the decline. Hayes, she said finally. Assemble a small team. Rook, you lead. One other. Not Risha. We need her here. Take Jax, the apprentice. He's young, strong, follows orders. 4-hour maximum. Survey only. If it's not immediately, obviously useful, you mark it and return. No heroics. Understood? Understood, Rook said. Carr looked like he wanted to object further, but held his tongue. The decision was made. The fissure was a wicked, dark smile in the hull. They entered through a secondary airlock that groaned in protest, its gears long frozen. The space beyond was a cathedral of ruin. The comms array had collapsed inward, a spiderweb of shattered crystalline transmission dishes and buckled support beams. Their suit lights carved cones through air so still and cold it felt solid. Jax, a lanky young man whose optimism had been sanded down to a nervous determination, followed Rook closely. You're sure about this, Rememberer? Place gives me the creeps. Positive, Rook lied. He led them through the debris field, his perception focused on the cold hum. It grew stronger, a sub-aural vibration he felt in his teeth rather than heard. They found it under a fallen crossbeam. Not a box or a console, a sphere, about 1/2 meter in diameter. Its surface was the same opalescent black as the data crypt, but it was pitted and scarred, as if it had been through a war. And from a hairline fracture near its base, a faint silver light seeped out, not illuminating anything, just hanging in the air like liquid mercury in 0G. Shto's a chert, Jax breathed, his suit language auto-translating. What the hell? Don't touch it, Rook said. He circled the sphere. The hum was definitely coming from within. It wasn't Aegis. The frequency was older, stranger. He remembered the Aegis's final fragment log. It had mentioned the cosmic immune response, the natural process Romulus had been born from. Was this a piece of that? A fragment of the substrate left behind like shrapnel from a primordial battle? As he stared, the silver light coalesced. It didn't form an image, but a concept. A geometric shape that implied infinite recursion. A feeling of endless, patient observation. Then, a voice. Not in his ears, but in the meat of his brain, cold and clean as surgical steel.
Query source of persistent anomalous data stream.
It wasn't speaking to him. It was speaking through him, using his neural scar as a transducer. It was asking about the psychic broadcast, the scream of grief he'd sent through the outpost.
Identity, localized consciousness, cluster, designation, human, status, degraded, observation, emitting high entropy information patterns, grief, guild, contradicts, prior model of terminal simplification event in this sector.
It was talking about the pulse. It knew the pulse should have simplified them. It was confused that they were still here, still noisy. Rook fought to form a coherent thought back, to project without the amplifying focus of the command nook. We survived. We resisted.
Resistance is an energetic inefficiency. Simplification leads to stable equilibrium. Your persistence requires explanation, analysis, possible recursive error in simplification protocol, or possible emergence of a new parameter. Latin data insufficient.
Rook, you okay? You're just standing there. Jax's voice over the comm was worried. The sphere's light pulsed.
Additional localized consciousness detected. Simpler pattern, less noise. Sample may provide clearer data.
A tendril of the silver light, swift as a striking snake, lashed out from the fracture. It didn't touch Jax's suit. It passed through it, through the helmet, and connected to the young man's forehead for a fraction of a second. Jax screamed. A short, sharp sound of utter alien violation. Then he went silent. He stood perfectly still. Jax, report, Rook shouted, lunging forward.
Sample acquired. Analysis. Fear, loyalty, curiosity. low amplitude, noise, predictable, inconclusive for primary query. The bridge consciousness, you, remains the key anomaly.
The tendril retracted. Jax swayed, then crumpled to his knees, retching inside his helmet. It was in my head. It was reading me. The sphere's light focused on Rook.
You carry the mark of the precursor anomaly, Romulus, yet you persist. You broadcast pain. This is illogical. Pain is a system alert to be resolved. You amplify it. You share it. This suggests a function beyond survival. Define this function.
Rook stood before the leaking sphere, a fragment of the universe's immune system, and understood. This wasn't Romulus. Romulus had been a cancer, a hijacked process with an agenda. This was the original process, dumb, vast, and utterly amoral. It wasn't evil. It was curious. It had detected an error, surviving noisy life where there should be quiet, and it was investigating. To it, they were a bug in the code, and it was deciding whether to fix them. He thought of Carr, of the lottery, of simplifying the inefficient. This was the same logic, raised to a cosmic power. He couldn't fight it. He couldn't reason with it. All he could do was what he had always done. Be an anomaly. Be confusing. He focused on the most human, illogical thing he could. He focused on the memory of his father, a stern, silent man who had once, when Rook was 7 and had broken his arm, carried him 3 kilometers to a clinic without uttering a word of complaint, his face a mask of contained fear and love. He focused on the feeling, the complex, messy, painful, beautiful contradiction of it. Love wrapped in sternness, fear expressing itself as action, a silent man making noise for his child. He poured that memory, not as data, but as raw, emotional experience, toward the sphere. The cold hum stuttered. The silver light churned, patterns forming and dissolving chaotically.
The contradiction, signal and noise coincident, suffering and preservation linked. This parameter, love, creates recursive loops, inefficient, persistent. Data corrupts simplification, algorithm, error, error.
The light snapped off. The hum ceased. The sphere sat inert, just a scarred black ball. Rook, what did you do? Jax whispered, shakily getting to his feet. I confused it, Rook said, his own mind reeling, with something it can't optimize. He looked at the dead sphere. It was still a threat. It had sampled Jax. It knew they were here, and it was programmed to resolve errors. Grab that end, he ordered, pointing to a broken strut. We need to bury this thing. Seal it in. Now. They worked frantically, piling debris over the sphere, creating a makeshift tomb. It wasn't a solution. It was a hiding place. As they worked, Rook understood the new, horrific layer of their predicament. They weren't just fighting the cold and the dark. They weren't just mourning a dead Earth. They were being watched by the universe itself, and the universe had just found them interesting.